Greetings and welcome to York on Games number 44, the last guest lecture for Strixhaven University. My name is Christopher Yorke. I am a visiting professor at the University of Zagreb, and today I'm going to talk to you about yet another topic in the philosophy of sports and games, and it wraps up our Secrets of Strixhaven tournament for the Arena Gauntlet League, and also perhaps previews some interesting themes for Marvel Superheroes League. Without further ado, let's get to it. My talk today is called The Ethics of Human Bodily Modification for the Purposes of Participation in Sport. Now that's a mouthful. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking about people changing their bodies in one way or the other, whether that's modding up by giving themselves extra capacities or modding down by depriving themselves of some of the use of their capacities in order to either qualify for or excel in certain athletic competitions. Now, I've said before, this can go two different ways, so let's make it very concrete for you. First, I want you to think about how you normally feel, morally speaking, about the following scenario. Imagine, right, that you're playing basketball with Dr. Octopus from the Marvel Comics world. Now, obviously, there are some issues here. The first issue is safety, in that those arms are dangerous, right? They're flailing around the court, and your physical integrity could be threatened by Dr. Octopus's flailing arms. But also, and this is perhaps important for sports and games alike, there's an issue of fairness here. So Dr. Octopus, of course, can lift himself off the ground with his arms, give himself a height advantage. He can pass the ball to himself via his arms and get shots off. And it wouldn't be any competition for you to play basketball against Dr. Octopus. So it's against fairness as well. So fairness and safety ground this intuition that I think we all share, that if someone mods up and has advantages that nobody else does in sports and games, that this is somehow immoral. Or at least that's what I'm going to be testing as our intuition. You can decide and discuss amongst yourselves whether you share this intuition, but I think it's generally held that this is a bad thing with a capital B and a capital T. Here's something else. That's a very separate moral intuition that skews in the other direction. So if we intentionally injure or downgrade our bodies surgically or with controlled force for the purposes of qualifying for other able or disabled sport, this is also immoral, right? So if you want to justify this second intuition, right, like why wouldn't I surgically become paralyzed, for example, to take part in the Paralympics? Well, this is less about fairness and safety, right? Because it could be a safely administered procedure. And presumably, once I'm also paralyzed, then it's also fair. So, how do we make sense of both of these moral intuitions in different directions, one against modding up and one against modding down, in the same theoretical framework? And I argue that we appeal to the moral philosophy of perfectionism. I'll get to that in a slide, but for the moment, we just say that these are prima facie, or on the face of it, morally problematic scenarios. We'll look at these modding up and modding down phenomena in great detail later on, but all we need to say for now is that it looks to be a problem. Now, back to perfectionism, which I think unifies our rationale behind why modding up and modding down might be considered immoral for different reasons. But maybe first. Now, let's talk about bioconservatism, right? So there's this general theory, right, that keeping the human body in its natural state is morally preferable or correct. in all cases where this is a possible, feasible alternative. And I think that this is a unifying theory that could justify, moral intuitions against modding up and modding down. But I think that we want to resist the pull of bioconservatism, especially because in its extreme form, right? You could say, well, we don't want things like tattoos or piercings, because this is a deviation from the human body's natural state, right? And that is immoral. I think that's probably a wrong-headed way to look at things, and I think that we do value autonomy to the extent that we want to allow minor non-performance related modifications to occur, especially if they're purely decorative. There seems to be a well-accepted place for that in society. So if bioconservatism is bad and it's out and it's not applicable here, what other theory do we have? I've already previewed it. It is perfectionism. But we're not there yet. First, we have to talk about a corollary, or rather like a parallel argument against doping, right? So modding and doping, are they peas in a pod? Are they the same kinds of things? Well, looking at objections to performance-enhancing substances, or what some people call doping, there are grounds for objecting to them in the sense that they cause physical harm, either in the short term or long term, to the athlete. They are negatively socially stigmatized, which is that even if they don't cause bodily harm, their use causes reputational harm, which can lead to opportunity costs down the road, say broken relationships or broken contracts or a lack of advertising revenue, however you want to cash that out. There is a harm that's not physical, and that they're expensive and rare, and this causes issues of distributive justice. So these are parallel arguments from the doping world that I think we can sort of port back into modding. And maybe, again, if bioconservatism is out and our preferred answer of perfectionism has yet to be revealed, can the doping argument provide the consistent theoretical basis for refusing modding up or modding down? And I'm going to say, surprise, no. So I think there are defenses against the objections to modding. So in here, I'm going to say that harm is to a great extent defined by one's own standards. So if I'm genuinely exercising my autonomy and I'm not coerced and modding my body into any condition, then being in that condition can't count as a harm to me. It's a good by my own lights. I wanted my body to be in condition X. I made it into condition X. So how then can I be considered to have harmed myself? And next, negative social stigma, right, is historically contingent. And you think that, well, the longer that modding technologies exist and the more accepted they become, then any negative consequences to reputation and opportunity to athletes using modifications, whether that's up or down, that'll no longer happen. And therefore, this charge won't have any force to it anymore. And also, right, if mods become more effective and popular, then costs of the modding will go down, which will ease the issue of distributed justice, which surrounds the availability. So it looks like none of the objections against doping really hold water against modding from this point of view. All right, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, we can say a couple more things. We can say that the other big moral theories, right, deontology and utilitarianism, don't really give us a clear perspective on whether modding is or is not morally acceptable. So utilitarianism, the idea that the moral good is defined in terms of human happiness or human pleasure, it gives mixed conclusions regarding modding. Why? Because none of us, or many of us at least, haven't modded. We don't know what pleasure or happiness would result from modding, and therefore any conclusions that we land at in the abstract are of questionable reliability, right? It's outside of our experiential wheelhouse. For the vast majority of us, therefore, utilitarianism is kind of a wash. We can't draw a reliable conclusion, which gives us moral guidance. And any good moral theory should give solid moral guidance. And in terms of deontology, it says it's obviously predicated on the idea, that you have to respect the autonomy of rational agents. And Kant's formulation of the categorical imperative says that, well, to decide whether something is is moral or immoral, we have to look at it and ask the question, well, what if everybody did this? If everybody modded, what would happen? Or if everybody didn't mod, what would happen? And again, because let's say the real world effects of everybody modding is not known, or nobody modding is not known, well, it's hard for us to say what kind of world that would be. And maybe defenders of deontology could have a crack at that and try to defend a deontological refutation of modification, but that's not really what I'm here for. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a wash. Maybe now we can talk about perfectionism. Once again, this is the philosophical position that the expression of uniquely human capacities is the source of moral value in the world. In previous writings, I had identified the intentional human realization of a capacity as a sort of unit of moral value comparable to the atom. Recently, I've come around to a view that it might be more like a Lego brick, in the sense that there are different types of, capacity realizations that are differently valenced, or that have different shapes, or that stack with other capacities to allow other human doings to occur. And this position that I've developed is arguably distinct from the old school Aristotelian virtue ethics, the ancient Greek stuff, or eudaimonism, the good lifeism more generally, since the focus is on the development of specific capacities rather than on virtues more abstractly. Since we're talking about capacity expression as a sort of basic moral unit, we talk about what humans do that's uniquely possible for them, like speech and, I don't know, achievements more generally, physical, mental, as long as it has to do with, realizing your intention in that act. So we get away from, the sort of more metaphysically baggaged idea of the virtues, like courage. What is courage really? Well, it's a series of things that people do, and we sort of aggregate that into an abstract idea called courage. But to say that courage is something that exists separately from those concrete realizations of human capacities, I think leaves a little bit of hostage to fortune kind of problems for the dedicated philosopher of sport. So perfectionism is a pared down moral philosophy that says we're just looking at, human doings, intentional human doings, as the unit of moral goodness. How can perfectionism serve to give us grounding for these divergent moral intuitions that I outlined at the beginning of the presentation, against modding up and against modding down? Well, let's take a quick look at what perfectionism values and what it disvalues. So we're looking at perfectionist goods. We're looking at enabling, developing, and creating capacities, and perfectionist bads, quite simply, are inhibiting, reducing, or destroying capacities. Let's bring it all back home. So, in the case of an unfair or unsafe enhancement, the modified body dominates the unmodified body and robs competitors of the opportunity to express their capacities, which is a perfectionist bad. So what makes Dr. Octopus playing basketball against a normal human bad is that the normal human doesn't have a chance to play basketball, right? They can't achieve what they would normally achieve in the face of unfair competition. Now, fair competition, we have no problem with, because all athletes will have the same ability to achieve their excellences or to realize their capacities on the basketball court. But if someone has a leg up on everybody else by having access to a new technology or substance or whatever, then that causes problems. However, in the case of intentional self-mutilation for the purposes of qualification for disabled sport, the downgrading of the human body robs the self-mutilator of the opportunity to express various other human capacities, which is a perfectionist bad. So, in conclusion here, perfectionism advocates against asymmetrical cases of modding up and all cases of modding down, but it might advocate a universal opportunity to mod up. So the asymmetrical modding up, where you have one enhanced and one unenhanced participant to a sport or a game, is bad because it inhibits the one who's not modded up. And everybody who mods down robs themselves of the ability to achieve certain capacities, and therefore is committing a bad or an evil on the perfectionist view. Now, if we all mod up, if we all had the opportunity to mod up, and there were no adverse effects to modding up, it looks like perfectionism would provide us with a unifying philosophical position that would defend that across the board kind of modification. So in conclusion, perfectionism gives us the requisite theoretical position for coherently explaining and justifying our shared moral intuitions on various types of bodily modifications, both modding up and modding down. Other competing moral theories, by comparison, suffer from explanatory inadequacies. And finally, perfectionism leaves the door open for defending hypothetical sport contests with universally modded up participants, such as, I guess a sort of perfected version of the enhanced games, which just took place last month in Las Vegas. And here, a little sort of throw ahead to Marvel Superheroes League, you have a sort of depiction of all sorts of modded up across different axes characters in a seeming race with each other. And, that's maybe letting 1,000 flowers bloom. I'm not sure. What do you think? As always, there's time for questions. So I hope that you enjoyed this series of lectures that I've given for the Secrets of Strixhaven League as a guest lecturer, both at the University of Zagreb and at Strixhaven University. Signing off for now, and once again, leaving Yorke on games in a strangely multimedia, strangely year-spanning, unsequential series of offerings. I've been your host, Dr. Christopher C. Yorke. Thanks for your attention.